Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. We've got an exciting topic today. We're going to talk all about the ketogenic diet, how you can do it with higher protein, how you can do it as a female and do it effectively. And we're also going to talk about how to measure your fat burning state, how to use a simple instrument that you can have around throughout the day. That all it takes is a breath, right? And you can actually test if you're burning fat or not. And so we've got a great guest. This is Vanessa Spina, and she is a sports nutrition specialist, biomedical scientist, and the best-selling author of Keto Essentials, great book. She's an international speaker and host of the popular Fast Keto podcast, which features a weekly protein series episode. Vanessa founded Ketogenic Girl in 2015, which has an online social media audience of over 500,000 people, and several thousand people have gone through her Ketogenic Girl Challenge program, which serves to optimize metabolic health with nutrient-dense, real food nutrition. And Vanessa just launched a brand new product called the Tone Device, which measures breath acetone. That is a ketone detected on the breath. And this is really exciting because if you're like me, you don't like doing blood pricks. Like I freak out every time I try to prick my finger to see what my blood sugar and my blood ketone levels are. I greatly prefer using a breath measurement. And there are several out there, but some are very, very challenging to use. And she has really simplified this. And so I'm excited to talk about that. Vanessa, welcome to the podcast.
Wow, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Absolutely. Well, you started your site in 2015, which was really, fairly early. Ketogenic lifestyle has really picked up in popularity over the last several years. I know I first discovered it in really about 2011, 2012, but there was very little information on the internet. And so you were really an early pioneer in this. So let's talk about how you got started with a ketogenic lifestyle.
Sure, I would love to. I mean, I really found it through my own, I like to say, desperation in trying to fix my health. One of the biggest things for me is I always felt like I wasn't fit inside my body. Like I would go and see my doctor and say, I don't feel like a fit person. I feel like I'm, sort of fat and I just don't feel good about my appearance or how I feel in my body. I don't feel body confidence. And my doctor would always be like, don't worry, you're at a healthy weight. You look fine. Like you're obsessing. And, he always would dismiss my concerns. And it wasn't until I started learning about body composition and I had a body scan done and found out that I was close to 40% body fat, even though on the outside, I was sort of like a toffee, like thin on the outside, fat on the inside. And I didn't realize my body fat was so high. And even my scan tech, when he did it, he thought there was a mistake because, you really couldn't tell from the outside, but I always felt like I wasn't fit internally. And when I started understanding body composition, I started understanding, how to change my body composition and doing keto. I first was able to recompose my body after 4 years of keto with down to about 34%. So it was a big change and I felt really good about that. Then I started doing higher protein modified keto and I was able to get down to 21% body fat in just 2 years. And I wasn't working out during that time. I was in school and I was just amazed by the results. So I've been talking about sort of this higher protein approach to keto for a few years and making it my mission for people to understand the power of protein and muscle protein synthesis and how important it is to know what your body is actually composed of. Because if you don't feel good in your body, and everyone's sort of telling you like that, it's all in your head or whatever, and you realize that you can actually get your body scanned to see what's your bone density, what's your bone mass, how much skeletal muscle do you have. And I think for men, this comes more easily. Men tend to focus more on their skeletal muscle and, having big muscles, but women don't focus on that as much. We focus more on losing fat and getting toned, but it really is the same thing. So when I found out that I could really alter my body composition with keto, it's something that I really started to pursue quite passionately. And I started the blog just as a hobby. I was working in finance. I used to be a news anchor, and I loved my job, but I was never really that fulfilled by it. And gradually my hobbies started to just take over and become so popular that I ended up leaving that career and starting the blog. And that was in 2015, as you said. And I've been doing it full time ever since, in between going back to school. But it's just been amazing. And I really feel so fulfilled from working in this field because I see the difference that it makes in people's lives. Whereas when I worked in finance, I kind of was just helping rich people make more money. It wasn't very satisfying. So it's been amazing. And I just love this community of people and working in this space.
Well, that's great. And, there's so many people that are worried when it comes to protein. I know I've posted things on my Instagram or different social media about consuming a certain amount of protein. And people are like, that just seems like so much. And people will ask questions like, will that affect my kidneys? And there's so much concern about it. So can you help clear the air on what protein is, how our body metabolizes it, why it's so important to be as a foundational component of our diet?
Yeah, so I actually found this question so intriguing and so confusing that I went back to university to study biochemistry and biomedical science in a 2-year program to understand what protein actually is. What is it actually doing in our bodies? Because I was reading one thing and the other thing, and I was so confused that I just couldn't make sense of it. So I was like, I have to go study biochemistry and understand this for myself so I can better explain it to people. And what I realized is that, there's really the main difference between our macros comes down to whether we have building blocks, which are protein, or energy. And energy comes in 2 forms, which is really carbohydrates, which we call carbohydrates, or hydrocarbons or lipids, which we call fats. And those are really the energy macronutrients, whereas protein is not an energy macronutrient. It can be oxidized for energy, but it really is primarily our building blocks. When you talk about eating protein, I focus a lot on how to activate muscle protein synthesis, but we need protein for everything in our bodies, from our hair to our tissues, not just skeletal muscle, but also our bones, our mineralized protein, our hormones that are peptide based, like insulin, are made of protein. So our body always prioritizes building all of those tissues and hormones that we have in our bodies. And then we also have this other component, which is building skeletal muscle, which keeps us strong. And we have to prioritize these building blocks of protein in order to prevent muscle protein breakdown. So we have, muscle protein synthesis, which is activating, the initiation of building more protein, but we also have this muscle protein breakdown. And it's the balance between those 2 forces that, determines how much muscle we actually maintain and build. So I like to look at macros in terms of, energy macros, when we get carbons from our food, and building blocks, which make up, so much of our bodies. And that's why prioritizing protein is so important. But it also comes down to our appetites. Appetite correction, appetite drive is actually, a lot of our appetite is driven by our need to get essential amino acids. And so I found for myself that when I started prioritizing protein, that I had this effortless appetite correction. So for years, I struggled with food addiction, overeating. And when I started prioritizing protein, I started just feeling satiated, feeling full, and I stopped thinking about food all the time. So I had that effect. But also there is this muscle protein synthesis aspect where you can become more lean by making sure you get adequate protein at every meal, because you are triggering this muscle protein synthesis, and therefore you are building more muscle. And this helps you to get lean and lower your body fat percentage as well.
Yeah, really interesting. So you're saying that consuming a certain amount of protein puts your body in a state where it's, I guess, at least for a period of time, anabolic and maintaining or even growing muscle. Now, obviously, you want to add in exercise with that to help really grow the muscle, but it's helping maintain that lean body mass. Now, you also mentioned hormones. Consuming enough protein also helps keep that human growth hormone elevated, which is a muscle preserving hormone. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's one of the interesting things about keto is that you can do really two types of keto, which I talk about all the time, which is sort of the sort of more moderated protein where you have the protective effects of ketones, which are anti-catabolic. So you can still get away if you're doing keto with eating less protein. If your goal is different than, say, getting lean, or you've already achieved the level of leanness that you want to, and you don't want to be eating as much protein, you can eat less. And like I said, you can get away with that because you have this, anti-catabolic effect. But you can also do this modified keto, which is higher protein, if your goal is really getting lean, losing body fat. So it kind of depends on what you're optimizing for at the moment. But keto itself, to me really is this, the state in which of ketogenesis, of where you are, generating new ketones from burning your own body fat. And it's a state in the body that you can really thrive in. You get all these wonderful effects we always talk about from keto, but you can do it either by doing a ketogenic diet with these, traditional macros that people often talk about, or you can do it with a combination of burning your body fat and dietary fat. And that's sort of this modified higher protein keto.
Yeah, for sure. And the initial studies on keto were really done on kids that were having seizures. And what they found was they needed this really high fat, low protein, very low carbohydrate diet in order to get the ketones elevated high enough to where it shut down the inflammatory pathways in the brain and was created more neurostability for these kids. And so it was really a therapeutic diet for, kids that have uncontrollable seizures. But, you can't really necessarily use that research to then find the best diet for everybody else. And so for certain conditions, seizures or certain types of cancers where we may want a lower amount of protein, your traditional macros for keto, at least when I was originally learning keto, it was something like 65 to 70% of your calories coming from fat, 20 to 25% from protein, and then about 5 to maybe 10% for certain individuals of your calories, typically about 5% coming from carbohydrates. And when I first learned about keto, that's what I was teaching as well. But I noticed that I felt better consuming more protein. And I wasn't really focused on counting macros. So for me personally, in my daily life, even though I was teaching that sort of standard, I wasn't counting macros. And when I finally counted macros, I realized, gosh, I'm eating like 130, 150 grams of protein a day. And that's when I feel my best, right? And so it was really a higher protein version of the ketogenic diet. And I was in ketosis because the rest of my diet was mostly healthy fats and maybe some berries, things like that. And I was very active and I was intermittent fasting as well. But that's what I just found from my own, personal experience. And I think, you and several other people were some of the first that kind of helped break out of that mold that, hey, we need to be in this box of, 20 to 25% protein. If you do too much protein, the idea was if you ate too much protein, the protein would turn into sugar. And I know you, with your biochemistry background, that's not actually true.
That's why that was the main reason that I went back to school, was to study gluconeogenesis. Because I found it so confusing when other people talked about it. And like you said, it's kind of the primary reason why people are told to moderate protein. And it is true that, there's a lot of debate over whether gluconeogenesis, which is the genesis of new glucose, is a demand or supply driven process. There's a lot of debate about that. And just that debate motivated me enough to go back to study it so that I could understand it myself. There's still a lot of debate. I have experts on the podcast who are experts in lipids and in protein, and they both still debate whether this process is supply or demand driven. However, it is really the main reason, as you said, that people are told to restrict or moderate the protein low. But there are certain things that really define the state of ketogenesis. And the main one is the control of carbohydrate intake. And you can see that people will enter ketogenesis when they do extended fasting, because they are completely limiting their carbohydrate intake. And so you can see some of the same processes happening where people get into ketosis. And I've been able to get into ketosis and stay in ketosis, even though I don't eat, 200 grams of fat per day. Mm-hmm. And I am fueled from my own body fat. And so I'm making those ketones from my own body fat, and I'm getting adequate fat in from my diet to maintain healthy hormones. But, if your goal is to get lean and you're eating excessive amounts of fat, you won't get there. If you are eating so much fat that you're not creating a caloric deficit. And, you really still need to maintain some kind of deficit if your goal is to lose fat. And that's why so many people come to keto is because they want to lose weight. It's not the goal for everyone. So, that's why I always go back to goals and what it is that you're optimizing for. But, that traditional keto diet, if you get to your goal, say your goal is to be at 19% body fat and you get there, and then you decide that you want to maintain, if you enjoy higher protein, you can still do that. And you just need to take in more calories from either healthy fats, healthy carbs, or any combination of those, or you can do keto if you prefer that lifestyle. I personally don't. I don't like eating fat. Like the thought of eating a stick of butter is just it makes me nauseous. Like I just like protein. So you have to find, what works best for you and what you think you can sustain over a long-term lifestyle, because that ultimately I think is what makes keto so successful for so many people is they enjoy it. And, whether that's doing, very high protein, very low protein, it's just you're eating healthy fats and you're integrating those into your life more than say if you're doing a high carb, like zero fat diet, which is like not sustainable for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. So when in your programs, about how many grams of protein or how does somebody set up their macros? Like what should they be looking for there?
Yeah, so there's two main programs that I recommend to people when they're starting. So the first is the original 28-day challenge, and that does have traditional keto macros. But for most people who are coming from a standard American diet or high carb Western style diet, they do successfully train their bodies to burn fat and they get off of like processed foods and carbs. So it's a great place to go if you're someone who feels like you don't have any structure, you're out of control, you're eating a lot of carb, you feel like you're addicted to carbs and sugar. It gets people off carbohydrates into eating a lot of healthy fats, and a lot of healthy fats that come in protein in our main protein foods. So it helps people to do that. I also have the higher protein keto, which is this modified higher protein keto that we talked about, and that is closer to an average amount of around 90 to 100 grams of protein. For most people who do my program are women, so that's a really good number for most women to get every day, just to make sure that they are triggering muscle protein synthesis at about 3 different times in the day, 3 meals in the day. And those are the two main programs that work really well for my clients. And some of them, I always ask, how do you prefer to eat? Do you prefer to eat more keto style, or do you prefer to eat more higher protein? And whichever, method they prefer is usually the one that they're going to, do well on long term.
Yeah, for sure. So you said 90 to 100 grams typically. So I've heard that hitting about 30 grams of protein, in a meal is kind of the critical threshold, yes, somewhere around there to help turn on protein synthesis. Is that correct? Or muscle synthesis, I should say.
Yeah. So the muscle protein synthesis will be triggered by the leucine threshold, which is when, it's about 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine increases in your blood. So when that amino acid of leucine, that increases by 2.5 to 3 grams in the blood, it triggers muscle protein synthesis. And then you have to eat all the other, amino acids with it in order to then build the muscle. So, you trigger that muscle protein synthesis, like, sort of turning the ignition in the car. And then all the other amino acids that you eat with that whole protein will then initiate the actual process of building the muscle. And so just as you said, around 30 grams of protein tends to do that, but there is some variation between foods. So I like to post, I have one image on my Instagram, which shows the actual amounts, quantities of each food, so for beef, it's like around 5 to 6 ounces. For chicken, 5 to 6 ounces. If you're doing a whey protein or egg white protein, then it's just 30 grams, because whey protein or egg white protein is about 10% leucine. So it depends on which food, like fish or beef or chicken. Sometimes you need more or less, but around 30 grams per meal is a great target for people to have if they're doing 3 meals a day.
Yeah, that's good to know. Leucine is in a family of amino acids called the branched chain amino acids, and it's really the critical one. There's 3 of them: valine, isoleucine, and leucine. It's the critical one that really drives the mTOR growth pathway, muscle growth pathway in the body. And the mTOR pathway gets a really bad rap, especially when it comes to aging, cancer, things like that. But it is really critical as well. And we kind of need to have a good on-off switch for the mTOR pathway. When the on-off switch is working well, then our body's going to be able to function really well. And when it's not, when we keep it off all the time or we keep it on all the time, that's when we have problems. And so being able to regulate that leucine threshold is a key component of it.
Yes, a lot of people have misplaced fears about mTOR, and it hasn't really been proven in the research that that is something that people should fear. For the most part, though, what you are saying makes sense. So if you are triggering mTOR, you're sort of in this anabolic or building mode. I like to look at it as sort of the balance between, being in the fed state and the fasted state. So anytime you eat food at all, you are in an anabolic or in a building mode. And, when you're in the fasted state, you're in sort of this catabolic mode. And it's that balance between the two that I find people really easily migrate to when they're doing keto, because they become very satiated from eating real food. They eat a lot of real protein, healthy fats, and naturally fast between meals, stop snacking, naturally just, stop eating around 6 or 7 p.m. And so there's adequate time in that, fasted state where you can balance that, like building, like you were saying, in that breakdown. I think the problem happens when people are, eating every couple of hours throughout the day, even if it's like a latte or some kind of drink, you're just eating food or you're consuming something constantly throughout the day. And there's no time for the body to ever go into that fasted state. And so that balance is really thrown off. And I think that really has more to do with some of the fears that people have around mTOR, is just that you're constantly, like you said, you're turning that light switch on and on, and you're never giving it a break.
Yeah, for sure. Because when you give it a break, that's when your body can go through autophagy, which is basically breaking down the old damaged proteins in the cell. So we really need to do that. So I'm not sure how big you're into intermittent fasting, but for everybody, I'm typically recommending at least 14 hours overnight to start to get some of that cellular cleanup. And I find that when you're satiated with the protein, the healthy fats, really becomes pretty easy. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. And research has shown that you get enough autophagy just from intermittent fasting, from eating adequate protein, from doing exercise.
Yeah.
You get that protein turnover just from those things, and you don't necessarily need to do like these long water fasts and things, to get autophagy. There's a little bit, there's some myths out there about that you're not going to get autophagy unless you do like a 3-day fast or something. That definitely takes autophagy to the next level, but you get enough autophagy, like you said, if you're just, doing intermittent fasting. I do like an 18-hour, usually, intermittent fast every day. And I have a 6-hour eating window, and I have 3 meals in that time to maximize muscle protein synthesis. If, I added a 4th meal in, I'd probably maximize it even more, but then I would have a longer eating window. So to me, that's, it's all about finding the balance between the two.
Yeah. And I think what you just said right there is a really great cycle, because when you're in that fasted state, you're basically suppressing that mTOR pathway. I think about it like a slinky. It's like my kids actually just got slinkies for Christmas. So, so when you have a slinky, you're cocking the slinky, right? So you're actually like, you're creating more potential energy, but it's not actually moving. In fact, it's actually being, it's contracting, right? In a sense, it's shrinking, but you've got this potential energy that's there. And then When you let go, obviously it shoots up to the next step, right? If you're doing it on steps. Well, I look at mTOR the same way. You want to suppress it, but in a sense, you're kind of cocking it to where it can really explode, but for a short period of time, in order for you to get the necessary anabolic components, right? The muscle protein synthesis components. So what I like to do personally is I like to do, something like what you're saying, 17, 18-hour fast, exercise. When exercise actually helps stimulate autophagy and also primes mTOR as well, and then break that fast with high protein meals, right? I typically am eating in a 6-hour eating window as well. And then you're going to get this great, muscle building effect that comes with it, because you're adding in the exercise along with the fasting. Your human growth hormone is at its highest level because you're fasting and exercise, right? Both of those components really help stimulate that growth hormone and put you in that anabolic state. But when you break your fast, you got to do it with the high protein.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. I think, some people prefer to exercise fasted. And I know, like, if I'm doing like a really intense workout, I tend to have more energy, in my workout if I do it fasted. I've also sort of found that doing it in between the first and second meal, it can be really helpful for optimizing muscle growth. So, having that first meal with about 20 grams of protein, and then having a workout, and then meal 40 grams of protein, and all of that being within a 5 to 6 eating window. I've read that has been, that can be optimal for building muscle. So I guess it just depends on, what your schedule is like, and if you prefer to work out fasted or you prefer to work out fed. There isn't really a ton of difference, between the two.
Yeah, I personally just feel a lot better. If I've got something in my stomach,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get the same level of intensity. But yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about this new device that you created as well, this tone device, and what the inspiration was behind that and the science.
Thank you. Yeah, I really love providing tools for people to make all of this easier. So that's, what I do every day, like with my cookbook or the meal plans or just the podcast. I'm trying to provide tools for people to integrate these, science-based teachings into their lives. And, I've benefited so much from them in my life. So, just like you have, you just want to share them. And a few years ago, I came across, I think it was the Levels breath device.
Levels.
And I saw, that it was measuring acetone, and it was telling people if they were sort of like burning carbs or fat. And I got goosebumps like all over my body. I was like, this is amazing. This is what I want to be doing. Like, I felt like this is what I needed to be doing in my career. So I kind of dropped some of the projects that I was working on at the time and just put all my energy and focus into this. And it's taken me, I guess it's been about 3 years now, just between 2.5 and 3 years now, to get the first version out now. So that is this, the first version is this one. It's the tone device, and it is a non-invasive way to just test your breath acetone. And what's really interesting about breath acetone is, for one, it's a ketone. Everyone knows there's 3 different forms of ketones. So there's beta hydroxybutyrate, which is sort of the storage form of ketones, and that can spontaneously combust into acetoacetate and acetone. And a lot of people, measure their ketones in the blood. But what I've always found, I guess, to be a drawback to that is that you're only able to measure what's left over in your blood. You can't measure what your liver has generated, and you can't measure how much you've used. You're getting a snapshot of what's circulating. It's the same thing as when you test your blood sugar. You're getting a snapshot of what's circulating, but you have no idea how much insulin your body's released or glucagon. Like, it's giving you like a little bit of insight. But I always wanted to be able to add more tools to understand it more. And with the acetone, you are testing a different form of the ketone, which is one that your body is excreting. And there's a lot of theories that it's a better indicator of usage of ketones. And so at least it gives you kind of a different insight into your ketone utilization. But the other thing that's interesting about it is that people, not just people on keto, but people doing any kind of diet who have some kind of caloric restriction will expel acetone. So you can use it to know if your body is burning fat. And that's very similar to what the levels does when it tells people if they're burning carbs or fat. It's just basing it on acetone. So this meter does the same thing. And what I love about it is it's very portable. It's non-invasive. So you don't have to, puncture your your skin to find out what's going on. So that means you can do it an unlimited amount of times in the day. And you also don't have to go like in the bathroom or, hide somewhere to do it, because if you're in public or at an airport or a restaurant and you start, pricking your finger, it's just not the most casual thing to start doing. But with this, you can pull it out anywhere and you can test yourself. And how I've been using it is to really dial in my fat burning and see like what's working, because I can test so much, I can see what happens when I eat this combination of foods, what happens when I work out in the morning or at night, or when I do a hike versus high intensity interval training. And so you start to get these trends and a lot of data that can tell you, if you are burning fat and if you're not, based on the results.
Yeah, that is great, Vanessa. And there are other breath acetone measuring devices, but they're kind of clunky. You mentioned the levels. It's very challenging to use. It's not very user-friendly. There's the Ketonics, which I have and I've endorsed and used for years, but it's like you got to hook it all up to your computer and this and that. And so, you're really simplifying it where it's just those of you guys that are listening on the podcast and aren't seeing the video, she just pulled it up, but it's like this very small little device. I mean, it looks like almost, maybe a little thicker, but like the size of your finger, more or less. And so it's just very, very simple, easy thing that you can be bringing with you. Doesn't weigh much. You can keep it in your pocket if you want, pull it out at any time, and use it. And really all it is just what, one long breath, or how do you actually use it?
So I can show you and I can talk about it here. But some of the advantages of it is that it's only a 20-second calibration. So the devices initially need a little bit of time to warm up the sensor, and it can take, quite a bit of time with some meters. This one takes about 20 seconds, which I find is just enough time to kind of like, if you're doing something, and I'll show you here. So right now my reading is 12, which is 12 KET units, and that is somewhat equivalent to 1.2 millimolar, but they are not exactly the same. They can't be equated because it's a different form of ketone. And it tells me next to it that I'm in the fat burning zone. So the screen itself tells you which zone you're in, which is something that I saw a lot of other devices didn't do. They kind of give people data, but they didn't necessarily tell them if they're like burning fat or if they are like, so this one has 3 different, ranges. The first is like no ketones, just 0. The second is a light fat burning, which is sort of light ketosis, and then the fat burning zone, which is, optimal ketosis. So, based on that, and then it quantifies it with a number. So you can tell like if you're higher or lower in that zone. Another thing about it, aside from the 20-second warm up, is its battery charge lasts a really long time. So I usually charge mine once a month. Some people, who have other devices, they have to charge them once a day. Right. So, that makes a big difference. Like if you're having to plug it in all the time. But, one thing I will say is my device is different in that it's just a wellness device. Some of the other ones on the market, they are medical grade devices. They're meant and designed to be used in a clinical setting. Mine is not. So it's more the wellness brand, the wellness device version of that. It's not as sophisticated as some of the other ones out there, but that's also reflected in its cost. So, I wanted something to be a little bit more accessible for people. It is a sophisticated technology, but without breaking the bank. If you don't need that sort of clinical level, if you're not using it for a medical condition. You're just using it for wellness and for feedback and data.
Yeah. And have you tried matching it up with your blood ketones at all?
Yes. Yeah. So I try to post a lot of those in my stories to show people. So what's really interesting about it is the breath tends to be higher than the blood from what I've noticed. But it also tends to have a little bit of a lag behind the blood. So sometimes it'll be like I had really high ketones this one night after I did the launch for the tone because I didn't sleep. I woke up, I had 5.6 millimolar blood ketones because I was just like on adrenaline and I really didn't sleep the whole night. And I tested the breath and it was 56. So a lot of times it's like exactly on the mark, like for what you're measuring. But then other times, like this morning, on here I had 16, which is 1.6, but my blood ketones were 0.6. So because it is a different ketone, they shouldn't be the same, but it does sort of generally tend to follow like, what you're seeing reflected in the blood. If you are burning fat, you should see it in both, but they shouldn't be the same. But it is really interesting to test.
Because acetone is the byproduct. So it's kind of the waste, more of the waste product. So beta hydroxybutyrate would go up, then it would get into the cell, right? Be used for energy, and then acetone would be coming out after. So is that correct?
That's why there's the lag.
Yeah. So therefore there's the lag. So when your acetone is up, it's a sign that your body's been utilizing those ketones. If your blood ketones are up, it's a sign that's like more or less like a potential energy, right? It's not actually been used yet. It's more potential energy that your body can then use.
Yes. And, I think some of the other things that I've found, just helpful with it in general is a lot of people have, said that some of the other devices, they're not as sensitive at low levels. And that's something that we really worked on here, is to make it very sensitive to low levels of acetone. So it's very precise. Another aspect to it is that, because you're getting this feedback, from the breath and the blood, and, you have this lag, it can kind of tell you sometimes like more in terms of what you're doing in terms of your exercise and also your fat burning, because I get a lot of people who tell me, I've been doing keto for so long, I never get above like 0.5 millimolar. That's the highest I see. But if they are doing, keto properly, or they're in a caloric deficit, they will see that reflected in terms of being in light fat burning or in the fat burning zone on here. So I think that's a frustration that a lot of people have, is that they just never see those numbers that they want to see, and they just don't get that feedback. And I think it's not the fault of those other devices or of measuring, this other form of ketone. It's just that when you're measuring the blood, like you said, it's a storage form, or it's showing what's left over, but it's not able to give you that indication of what's being used. So it's just a different kind of measurement that can give you different insight.
Somebody could have high blood sugar and high insulin, and their ketones, maybe they take exogenous ketones or something like that, and their ketones go up, but they're not actually using them for energy. Because in order to use them for energy, you have to have lower insulin levels, right? There's a certain threshold that we all have. And when that insulin level is high, it's over that threshold, you're not going to utilize the ketones. And so, unfortunately, at this point, we don't have a quick test where you can test your blood insulin levels, your fat, where your insulin is.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So this right here is looking at basically how well your body is utilizing ketones for fuel, not how much ketones are actually circulating in your blood.
Yes, that's generally the idea, and that's sort of the theory out there. I think that we still have so much to learn about measuring our blood sugar. Like you said, we still don't know what insulin's doing, measuring ketones. A lot of the times we get this data and this insight, and we think we know what it means. Sometimes we do. Sometimes it's just guesswork, but it's all just giving us more insight into what's happening in the body. And I think that's what's so important, is just, you can do different things and test yourself and see, what you get. Like I like to, when I'm feeling really, really good, I have like effortless energy. I feel really light in my body. I feel great. Whatever it is, I've got a lot of mental clarity. I like to then test myself in those times. What are those numbers? Because that kind of gives me insight into, what level of ketosis, or what should my blood sugar be, or what are my breath ketones doing, that when I feel so great, and kind of like journaling that, and then knowing that that's kind of like an optimal place for you, and just using that feedback in that way.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Biofeedback, right? I always tell people, really the path to getting healthy and having great health throughout the course of your life is almost like getting a master's degree in your own health. You really need to be listening.
So true.
And you're going to discover more about your own body, and by getting data and biofeedback like, this device provides, and basing it around how you feel, how your mood is, your mental clarity, your energy levels, your sleep quality, all those kinds of things help you really fine tune and understand what's going to work best for you. So I think that's great. Now, when we're looking at the measurements there, you said there's light fat burning, and then there's the fat burning state. Is that correct? So like, is it over 10 would be the fat burning state, or is it over 5?
So if there's no ketones detected, it'll say 0, and it won't make a sound. There's no audible sound if there's no ketones. So right away that you're not producing any acetone. Then the second zone is light fat burning, which is 1 to 9.
1 to 9.
That's the second zone. And then the third zone would be the fat burning zone, which is sort of like 10 and above. And so, most people don't go higher than 40 or 50. It's the same with the blood ketones. Like in a deep fast, you might see those like higher 4, 5, 6 numbers, but most people kind of top out there. So that's kind of the 3 ranges that it goes in. But the screen tells you which range you're in. And so then you can use the numbers to kind of give you an idea of like what's like a higher level of fat burning for you, what's a lower level. And what's really interesting is like testing myself and my husband, because he is not keto. He's kind of low carb. Because he's been home with me mostly, since we had the baby. He's been eating just the food that I make for him. And he's been like eating a lot less processed food, a lot less fast food, convenience food. And we tend to kind of fall into these similar numbers. So I'm like between 15 and 25, 26.
Yeah.
And I'm usually, when I do a reading, I'm like 15, 16 or 25, 26. And he is always 4. Like he's always 4. It's amazing. We've done hundreds of tests. And, sometimes he'll get like, we get really excited. He'll get like a 5 or like a 7 if like we've done a big workout or something. But it's amazingly consistent. And I think it just has so much to do with how precise the body is, and how efficient the body is. And that's another drawback to measuring blood ketones is, people sometimes see higher numbers at the beginning and then they don't see them as high later, because there's this efficiency, that your body wants to generate exactly how many ketones it thinks that you need. It doesn't want to overproduce them at the beginning. It can overproduce them. But with the breath, it doesn't seem to do that. So, like with Pete, he's got barely any ketones, but he always sees it reflected. He never gets a 0 because he's doing low carb, and he does intermittent fasting. But it's amazingly how precise the body is, that it finds kind of its sweet spot, and then it just stays there. And then the numbers only change if you kind of like switch things up. Like if he did a long, like if he fasted for like 8 hours or something, then he'll see a change, but it's remarkably consistent.
Well, that's great to know. And people can find this at tonedevice.com. Is that correct?
Yes, tonedevice.com, and also at ketogenicgirl.com. And so this is the first version, which is the white and gold, and it has a pink logo on it, but there is a black and gold one coming soon. That's going to be available for pre-order, I think, in the next week. And that's going to be available in February to March. And there's also a black and rose gold. So I'm working on some new colors. I'd like to also make a black and silver, because I know this one is kind of like, it's a little feminine. It's a little, it's a little girly. Like, most of my audience are women, but I kind of, wanted to come out with this one first. But I do have a black, 2 black ones that are coming that are a little bit less sort of like pink and
Excellent.
feminine looking. But yeah, I'm really excited for those versions, and I'm going to keep coming out with some new things. I'm working on an app as well. So this one does not have Bluetooth on it. And that's something that if I would have put Bluetooth integration into it, it would have taken another couple of years. So I wanted to just come out with this version.
Yep.
And there's something nice about not connecting to an app or a computer. You can record your own data. It does have records in it, up to 64 records, but you don't have to turn anything else on, to use it. And I kind of like that, but I do have other developments in store for it.
Well, that is great, Vanessa. It seems like a great device. I'll have to get one of those and try it out with my wife as well, and see what we're finding, what we're recording for you. So I think that'd be awesome. Great. Now let's talk about like your daily diet. Like, what are some of your favorite foods? How are you doing your meal timing, your exercise? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'd love to answer that. So every day is pretty much the same for me. I tend to have my first meal around noon. I usually just have like a coffee before that. And I eat really high protein. For the most part, I get about 100 to 140 grams of protein in a day. And I spread that out over 3 meals. So I actually used to do 2 meals for a really long time, but I've added in a third meal, which is a protein shake, just to be able to trigger muscle protein synthesis one extra time in that eating window. So I have a first meal, which is usually like a typical breakfast with eggs. And I make a lot of Maria Emmerich's protein bread. I just love it. It's really easy, just with egg whites. And I make a lot of sandwiches and stuff with that. Second meal is usually my protein shake, which is unsweetened almond milk, a cup of frozen berries, usually egg white protein powder, a scoop of that, and some ice. And for dinner, we do a lot of steak. Either beef or salmon is usually what we're having, sometimes chicken. And, I'm mostly carnivore-ish. Like, I don't eat a lot of like vegetable sides and things with it. If it's something that I want, I tend to gravitate more towards that in the summer, like asparagus and salads and things. But in the winter, I just don't have the same craving for it. So I just mostly just eat, like salmon or beef or chicken. And it keeps things really simple for me too, especially right now with Luca. It's a lot easier.
Yeah, less food preps.
To skip on that. And I just make sure I get the nutrient density in there. I eat a lot of liver as well. I make turkey liver pate and have, liver a couple times a month to make sure that, I'm getting all the nutrients there. Yeah. Which, just focusing on that nutrient dense food really, really works well for me. And I feel satiated all the time. And it's really awesome. It's really been working well for me.
So that's great. So your typical meals are between 12 and 6, like you said, high protein. Yes. And then how are you doing your exercise? How are you structuring your exercise? I know you're not sleeping because you got a newborn, but
so right now I actually just started working out again because everything's been so busy with launching the Tone and with Luca. But I realized that if I put my exercise mat in the living room, I can work out when he's doing like floor time, tummy time and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun. Like my husband and I, we have, 2 workout mats and we have our dumbbells. And sometimes when we're watching him or one of us is watching him, the other one will get like a 20-minute workout. And I just do body weight exercises, push-ups, squats. I have a couple of dumbbells to do lunges and, just all the body weight exercises that I can do. Sometimes it's a 20-minute workout. Sometimes it's like 10 and 10, it's like whatever I can get in when I'm, sort of watching him or taking a break. But I'd like to get back to something more structured, which is more like I used to do like a full 40 minutes, workout, but it'll come with time. And right now it's more like, just a speed workout. Sometimes I do squats holding Luca and add the extra 20 pounds, like a baby workout. So that helps too. And I just kind of get it in, where I can. But you can improve your body composition even if you don't really have much time to go to a gym or do anything like that. Like I really saw great results when I was studying and I was sitting all day, and I didn't really have time to work out because I was prioritizing protein.
Yeah.
I was still able to bring my body fat percentage down considerably in that time. So, I think it's good for people to know, even if you just have time for like 2 workouts a week, 3 workouts a week, you can, really see results if you are pairing that with that protein prioritizing.
Yeah, that's great. Well, this has been a great interview, Vanessa, and really excited for the launch here with the Tone device. Seems like a real great breakthrough in this space. It's going to help a lot of people understand their fat burning state. Again, I think a lot of the other devices out there are great, and I've used them for years, but the user friendliness of them is certainly lacking. And this is an area. This is a wide open area in this space to create something that people can use, that's quick, that's easy, that's portable. And ultimately, if people have other devices but they're not using them, they're not really doing them any good. So I want to just take a moment and acknowledge you for that, for the great work that you're doing. And guys, you can follow her as well. She's got a great podcast. It's a fast keto podcast. Is that correct? Yep.
Yes,
and then Ketogenic Girl. Where are you at on your socials? Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram at Ketogenic Girl, and on Facebook, the page is The Ketogenic Girl. And I have a couple of Facebook groups, which are really fun, Fast Keto Podcast and the 28-Day Challenge one. So we do a lot of discussion around protein and testing and all of that in those groups. So it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, great job getting the word out, helping so many people all around the world. Really appreciate your time today. It's been a great interview. Thanks so much. And guys, we'll see you on a future podcast. Be blessed, everybody.